It shows up near the trash at dusk, a low, pale shape sneaking with the ugliest face ever, totally indifferent to your presence. You shout at it, but it just keeps moving closer. It looks like a regular possum, but it isn't. You see, most people find the Virginia opossum very unpleasant. The pointed face looks like a diseased rat. But this weird animal in your yard is doing you a favor, secretly. It carries something almost magical in its blood, and once you get to know it, you'll never see this ugly creature the same way again. But first things first, let's talk about what you should do the moment you encounter a Virginia opossum. First, back away slowly and let it leave on its own. The opossum is nomadic. It does not establish fixed territories the way raccoons do, and it almost never becomes a permanent resident. A specific individual may pass through your yard repeatedly if your yard sits within its foraging range, but that range is large, often up to 50 acres, and usually this animal is just moving through, not settling in. If you leave it alone, it will continue moving along within minutes. If you chase it, corner it, or approach it with something, you are more likely to trigger either the hiss and teeth display or the collapse response. We'll talk about the collapse response in a bit. But the important part here is that neither of these behaviors are a real threat to you. Second, never pick up a Virginia opossum with bare hands, regardless of how non-threatening it appears. An opossum playing dead looks convincingly incapacitated, and people sometimes try to move one they believe is unconscious or dead. The animal can bite, and while a healthy opossum poses minimal disease risk compared to many other wildlife species, any bite from a wild animal will require immediate medical attention. If an opossum needs to be moved off a road, out of a structure, away from a specific hazard, then just use a shovel or a container to guide it rather than handling it directly. Thick gloves must be used if contact is absolutely unavoidable. If a young opossum is found alone, size matters for determining whether it needs help. Joeys, basically the young ones, that are still shorter than 7 to 8 inches nose to tail, are too young to survive independently and may need wildlife rehabilitation. One that is 8 inches or longer is likely old enough to fend for itself, even if it appears small, and should be left alone. Young opossums sometimes disperse from their mother and appear confused or lost for a day or two before finding their footing. This is totally normal. Third, if it appears sick, use a specific decision criteria before calling anyone. A healthy opossum playing dead will recover on its own and should be left completely alone. The thanatosis state, basically an involuntary collapse, can last anywhere from a few minutes to several hours, during which the animal is unresponsive, drooling, and emitting a smell from its anal glands meant to simulate the odor of a decomposing carcass. All of this is normal. The signs of genuine illness in an opossum are different. These signs include staggering in circles, moving in daylight in a disoriented way, or with a visible injury. Those warrant a call to wildlife rehabilitation. An opossum lying still on your lawn does not. Fourth, hide away any obvious or open food sources. This isn't because the opossum is destructive, but I'm sure you don't want to try attracting this animal proactively, right? Opossums are opportunistic omnivores. They are drawn to pet food left outside, unsecured compost, low-hanging fruits, and anything spilled near trash cans. Removing those attractants doesn't eliminate opossum visits, but it redirects their attention away from the areas closest to your home. A locked trash can and a clean porch dramatically reduce how often you see one. Now, there is a fifth tip, and it's the one that matters most if you live in a part of the country where the snakes in your yard can actually hurt you. But to understand why, you need to first know what this animal actually is, because the Virginia opossum is one of the strangest mammals in North America, and almost none of what makes it strange has been fully absorbed into the public's understanding of it. Here is something most people don't know. The Virginia opossum is considered a living fossil by some paleontologists, not in the sense that it is primitive or inferior, but in the sense that its fundamental body plan has changed very little in the last 65 million years. While every other major mammal lineage around it was diversifying, specializing, and adapting to new niches at a rapid pace, the opossum kept doing what it was doing and thriving. An animal that will eat anything, breed fast, and avoid confrontation rather than fight for territory turns out to be an extremely durable strategy when the environment keeps changing around you. The opossum outlasted the horses and the mastodons and the ground sloths, and I'm sure it'll outlast many species that exist today. The Virginia opossum is North America's only marsupial. This makes it taxonomically more closely related to the kangaroo and the koala than to any other mammal on this continent. It belongs to the order Didelphimorphia as the American marsupials, a lineage that separated from the Australian marsupials approximately 80 million years ago, when the land masses they inhabited drifted apart. The marsupials that went south became kangaroos, wombats, possums, and quolls. The ones in the Americas eventually became the 100-plus species of opossum found from southern Canada to Tierra del Fuego today. Didelphis virginiana is the only one that spread north of Mexico. Fossil evidence places the opossum lineage at approximately 65 million years ago, making the Virginia opossum one of the oldest surviving mammal genera in North America. It walked alongside animals that are now extinct, survived whatever ended them, and kept waddling forward with essentially the same basic body plan. The anatomy of the living Virginia opossum is not dramatically different from the fossilized specimens found in Paleocene deposits. This is an animal whose design was good enough the first time that evolution didn't bother improving it significantly for 65 million years. The defining feature of a marsupial is the pouch, and the opossum's is functional in a way that takes a moment to fully picture. Joeys are born after a gestation period of only 12 to 13 days, the shortest gestation of any North American mammal. At birth, each joey is roughly the size of a honeybee, blind, furless, and so underdeveloped that most organ systems are not yet functional. What is functional is the forelimbs. The joey uses them to haul itself through the mother's fur from the birth canal to the pouch, a journey of about 3 inches completed entirely on its own instinct in under a minute, at less than a week old biologically. Once inside the pouch, it latches onto a nipple and stays there for the next 2 months while the development that most mammals complete before birth happens in the shelter of the mother's body. A litter can be large, up to 20 joeys are born, but the female only has 13 nipples, which means the first joeys to reach the pouch and latch on are the ones that survive. After around 2 months in the pouch, the joeys are developed enough to ride on the mother's back. You may have seen this, a female opossum moving through a yard with a cluster of small animals clinging to her back, half hidden in her fur. This is normal maternal behavior, and it continues until the young are large enough to forage independently. The mother is entirely alone in raising them. The Virginia opossum does not pair bond, and males play no role in the raising of young. The opossum also has more teeth than any other land mammal in North America, 50 in total, including prominent canines that produce the alarming display when it hisses at a threat. Those teeth are designed for an opportunistic omnivore that eats whatever it finds: insects, snails, frogs, small rodents, carrion, fruit, berries, eggs, cockroaches, and occasionally juvenile snakes. The whatever it finds diet is one of the biological keys to its success across such a wide range. An animal that will eat essentially anything does not depend on any single food source and can adapt to radically different habitats, from Canadian farmland to Louisiana swamp to suburban New Jersey backyard. The thanatosis that I mentioned earlier, basically it means playing dead, is one of the most common defense mechanisms in North American wildlife, and almost everything people believe about it is wrong in small, interesting ways. The behavior is not a performance. The opossum does not decide to play dead the way a human might decide to pretend to be asleep. Thanatosis is an involuntary physiological response triggered by extreme stress, controlled by the autonomic nervous system rather than by conscious decision. The animal enters a catatonic state characterized by limpness, an open mouth, and the slowing of metabolic processes to near resting levels. The anal gland secretion that accompanies the state is also involuntary, a chemical signal that mimics the smell of decomposition, evolved specifically to reinforce the illusion of a dead carcass to olfactory predators. The opossum cannot control when it enters this state and it cannot control when it exits. The recovery can take minutes or hours, and the animal remains unresponsive throughout, which is why moving it or disturbing it during recovery is both unnecessary and potentially harmful. It will get up on its own. The rabies fear is perhaps the most persistent misconception about this animal, and the underlying biology is real even if it gets overstated in both directions. The Virginia opossum has a core body temperature significantly lower than most North American mammals, averaging around 35 degrees Celsius compared to 37 to 38 for a typical mammal. The rabies virus replicates most efficiently within a temperature range that the opossum's body does not consistently maintain. This makes the opossum a significantly poorer host for rabies than comparably sized mammals like raccoons, foxes, or skunks. Documented cases of rabies in Virginia opossums are extremely rare. The CDC classifies them as low risk for rabies transmission. The animal baring its teeth and hissing at your dog is almost certainly not rabid. That said, low risk is not zero risk, and any wild animal bite warrants the same medical response regardless of species. The cultural history of the Virginia opossum in North America is a study in consistent underestimation. Captain John Smith, who named both poison ivy and the opossum in his early Jamestown accounts, described Didelphis virginiana with the Algonquian word wapatemwa, meaning white beast. The name the indigenous peoples of the Powhatan Confederacy used acknowledged the most immediately distinctive feature of the animal, that pale, pointed face that most modern observers find off-putting. Indigenous communities across the East and South hunted and ate opossum for centuries before European contact, and the practice continued into and through the colonial period. Opossum meat appears in the diets of early American settlers as a reliable protein source. By the 19th century, opossum hunting was a distinct cultural tradition in parts of the rural South and Appalachia, particularly the practice of hunting with dogs at night and preparing the meat with sweet potatoes. Possum and taters appears in American folk songs, cookbooks, and regional literature throughout the 1800s. The animal that modern suburban homeowners treat as a nuisance was considered worthy of organized community hunting events and annual festivals in communities where hunting culture ran deep. It also carries one of the stranger footnotes in American presidential history. During the Taft administration in 1909, the Virginia opossum was briefly promoted as an alternative national mascot to the teddy bear under the name Billy Possum. President-elect William Howard Taft had been served a roasted opossum at a celebratory dinner in Atlanta, and toy manufacturers quickly produced stuffed Billy Possum toys to capitalize on the moment. The campaign lasted roughly a year before the teddy bear's cultural dominance proved unassailable. The Billy Possum is entirely forgotten today, but its existence suggests that the relationship between Americans and this animal has been far more varied and ambivalent across history than the current unwelcome visitor framing suggests. The animal's range has actually expanded over the 20th century, moving consistently northward as the climate warmed and suburban habitats provided year-round food sources. The Virginia opossum is now found across most of the eastern United States and significant portions of the Pacific coast, where it was deliberately introduced in the early 1900s. The northward range expansion continues. Populations are now documented in Ontario and Quebec in regions where they could not have survived even 50 years ago. Now for the tick claim, because it circulates everywhere, and the full picture is more complicated than the version most people have seen. The 5,000 ticks per season figure that appears in articles, social media posts, and wildlife brochures came from a 2009 laboratory study by researchers at Carey Institute of Ecosystem Studies. The study involved captive opossums, each inoculated with 100 larval ticks in controlled conditions. Researchers noted how many ticks remained on the animals at the end of the trial period, and worked backwards from that count to estimate how many had been groomed off and swallowed. The extrapolation to 5,000 per season came from that captive data. A 2021 review by researchers at Eureka College examined 23 published studies of Virginia opossum diet conducted over decades, covering the stomach and digestive tract contents of more than 1,280 wild opossums. Not a single study found ticks in the digestive contents of wild individuals. The The captive conditions, where opossums had little else to do and ticks were placed directly on them, appear to have produced grooming behavior and tick consumption that does not reflect what happens in the field, where opossums are moving, foraging, and responding to far more stimuli. What the honest version of the tick story looks like is this. Opossums are meticulous groomers. They do eat ticks when they encounter them, and they almost certainly consume more ticks than many other mammals of similar size because of their grooming intensity. Whether that adds up to 5,000 per season in natural conditions is unverified. The ecologists who produced the original research have acknowledged that the field evidence doesn't confirm the captive estimate. Opossums eat ticks. They probably eat a meaningful number. The specific figure has not been validated outside the laboratory. The animal is an opportunistic, thorough omnivore that happens to groom with a diligence that would impress a cat, and in the process eats whatever it finds on its fur, ticks included. That's the accurate version. What is fully and repeatedly verified in peer-reviewed research, and what almost nobody outside of toxicology circles knows about, is what is in this animal's blood. The Virginia opossum is resistant to the venom of most North American pit vipers. Copperheads, cottonmouths, timber rattlesnakes. These snakes are most likely to cause a serious medical emergency in a suburban or rural yard in the eastern United States, but they cannot kill a healthy adult opossum with a normal envenomation. Initial research on opossum venom resistance appeared in the 1940s. In the 1990s, a research group led by B.V. Lips at Ophidia Products Inc. identified the specific protein responsible. They named it lethal toxin neutralizing factor, or LTNF. The protein was isolated from opossum blood serum by high-pressure liquid chromatography, and when it was introduced into mice alongside lethal doses of venom from snakes across all 4 major venomous snake families, Crotallidae, Elapidae, Viperidae, and Hydrophiidae, the mice survived. LTNF neutralized the venom's lethal effects across the board, every major family of venomous snake tested. Further work identified that the first 11 to 15 amino acids at the beginning of the LTNF protein maintained most of the venom-neutralizing activity of the whole protein. The specific amino acid sequence was small enough to be synthesized chemically rather than extracted from opossum blood. It was then tested against western diamondback rattlesnake venom in mice and completely neutralized the lethal dose. The research was presented at the 249th National Meeting of the American Chemical Society and published in peer-reviewed journals including Toxin Reviews and the Journal of Venomous Animals and Toxins. Researchers at San Jose State University and Ophidia Products described the synthetic peptide as a potential replacement for current antivenoms. This matters because most antivenoms currently in use are produced using horse serum proteins. A large percentage of the population, particularly in developing countries where snakebite mortality is highest, is allergic to horse proteins. A synthetic antivenom derived from the opossum's LTNF chemistry would bypass that problem entirely. Researchers also documented that LTNF neutralizes the venom of scorpions and bees and toxins from various plant and bacterial sources. The research group has described it as a potential universal therapy for envenomation. The animal waddling across your yard at dusk carries in its blood a compound that pharmaceutical researchers are studying as a potential universal anti-venom for venomous snakebites worldwide. An anti-venom that would not rely on horse serum and could theoretically treat bites from snakes across multiple continents. 80,000 to 140,000 people die from snakebite annually around the world, most of them in countries where access to current antivenoms is limited. The opossum shuffling through your trash may hold a piece of the solution to that. And so, we finally arrive at the 5th tip, and this is specifically for anyone who lives in copperhead, cottonmouth, or rattlesnake territory. The opossum's venom resistance means it does not behave around snakes the way most animals do. It does not flee. It does not give them a wide berth. Opossums investigate, compete with snakes for food, and eat juvenile snakes when they can catch them. The opossum's presence in a yard represents a form of passive snake suppression. Not elimination, but consistent competitive pressure on the snake population in that area. I mean, nothing you can purchase from a pest control store can replicate this. In the late summer and autumn, when juvenile copperheads and cottonmouths are dispersing from their birthing sites and showing up in yards, sheds, and wood piles across the South and Mid-Atlantic, the opossums moving through the same landscape are the only animals in your yard that don't need to be afraid of them. Every other mammal, including your dog and your cat, is at risk from a juvenile pit viper strike. The opossum is not, and it eats them when it can. This does not mean opossums eliminate snake populations or provide any kind of guaranteed safety in a yard. They are nomadic and cover a large range, which means any specific area of your yard gets intermittent coverage rather than constant patrols. But in the aggregate, across a full season of foraging, an opossum moving through a yard with snake pressure is doing something measurable that is available nowhere else in the North American mammal roster. The practical upshot of all of this is simple. If you live in copperhead, cottonmouth, or rattlesnake country, and an opossum has been visiting your property, eating the windfall fruit from your trees, investigating the compost, checking the area near the woodpile at dusk, just leave it alone. Secure the food sources that keep it too close to the house if you don't want it on the porch. But in the parts of your yard where it's working, particularly near woodpiles, dense vegetation, and any structure where a juvenile snake might shelter, just let it do what it does. The next time it shows up near your trash at dusk, let it waddle wherever it's going. It knows exactly what it's doing out there. And now, you do too.